There are a lot of cases in which you might be struggling with the search for a death date for a person you're researching. You may need it to find an obituary in cases that obituaries would be available, or you may hope a death date will help you to get a death certificate or help you to determine a burial place. Our earlier presentation, Success Searching Plainfield's Historical Newspapers, discussed the use of computer indexes for newspaper searches, but those searches can sometimes fail for a variety of reasons, and browsing a newspaper is only a reasonable option when the time frame is limited. This webinar will discuss a number of free online resources that have the potential to help you find a death date for someone who died in the Plainfield area. Some of them are obvious resources, but might have tricky aspects to them. Some are very limited in what they cover. All of them are prone to change as time goes by and they receive updates and modifications. Even in combination, they're not guaranteed to provide the death date you're hunting for. But all but one of these resources has helped me to find a missing Plainfield area death date at one point or another, and I check them routinely during hunts for death dates. The list is not complete, of course. If you'd like to share a suggestion of a free website that's worked for you, there will be time for that after the questions at the end. Our goals in this effort are to use these resources to find our target person in a record, to recognize the person using the available details, and to obtain more details like that date, which are accurate details. We'll start with Find a Grave. It's a great resource and very popular. It can be used to search deaths over many years. To find the information from a person's grave, which has been listed by volunteers, you can type in a name and presumed location and leave the year died field blank, or experiment with a variety of options. If we search for Amy Webster in Plainfield, and this is the right Amy Webster, which we can seek to confirm through the use of this birth year and maiden name, we find the person we want, learn or confirm her burial place, and get her date of death. A quick and successful search. One important thing to consider when using Find a Grave, though, is that 3 of the biggest cemeteries serving Plainfield are not located in Plainfield, so you could miss Hillside Cemetery by using Plainfield as your location, and miss Brook Avenue Cemetery and Holy Redeemer Cemetery by specifying Plainfield or even Union County. Be prepared to try different locations or just use New Jersey if you're lucky enough to be working with an unusual name. You do not need to specify a cemetery, but if you want to, an easy way to deal with not knowing which cemeteries are in the Plainfield area is to click on Cemeteries and enter Plainfield into the cemetery location field. I type Plainfield followed by the letter U for Union County to find the right Plainfield quickly among all of their autocomplete options. After you click on Search, you can look below at either the map view or the list view to get a good idea of the area. You can toggle between them with the use of the button on the far right. It's also worth noticing how many memorials are counted for the cemeteries. If you have an idea of how large the cemetery is, it might give you a sense of whether the work of listing the people buried there is ongoing. In that case, the fact that your search is unsuccessful doesn't mean that the grave isn't there. Another issue to consider when using Find a Grave is that there isn't the same kind of broad interpretation of names as can be seen in searches on some of the major genealogy sites, which offer substitute spellings. A search of Find a Grave for Civil War veteran Thomas H. Terry does locate his presumed entry, despite the fact that on his headstone, apparently only his first and middle initials are given with the last name. Sadly, there are no dates given at all that could confirm that we have the right grave marker and from which we could obtain a death date. That does happen. Our luck is just as bad in a search for Mary Tenbrook, who's also buried in Evergreen Cemetery. No matches. If we believe that she was buried there, we could click on the cemetery name found on our list view or searched for by name and find her among the 108 people listed in that cemetery with the name of Mary, searching with first name only. Fortunately, last name is not required for searches. With her Dutch last name abbreviated, she's listed on Find a Grave only under the last name of Brook instead of Ten Brook. Find a Grave is not the only resource to use in searching cemeteries. A few years ago, the library was contacted by a family on the West Coast which was trying to track down the final resting place of a very young relative who had moved east with his mother after her divorce and remarriage, and they believed he had passed away around that time. All they knew was that the second husband had moved to Plainfield after possibly spending some time in Linden. There's his name filled in. Find a Grave couldn't find the boy. Again, no hits, this time in a statewide search. Rosedale and Rose Hill Cemetery in Linden wasn't covered by Find a Grave at that time. Fortunately, they had a searchable website of their own long before they were included in Find a Grave. The missing boy was found in the name lookup on rosedalerosehill.com, solving the mystery. He died back in 1946. By now, the cemetery is covered by Find a Grave, but we've just seen that you still can't find the once missing boy on that site. Only his mother, with her different last name, can be found there, presumably because Find a Grave volunteers would generally only have access to what they can see on existing markers in the cemeteries. That means that people who never had markers and people whose markers have been lost or damaged over time normally will not be listed on Find a Grave. If a cemetery has its own online index, they will have had access to their records to create it, and that individual website is worth checking. Holy Redeemer Cemetery in South Plainfield is another one that has its own searchable website. I would always check it as a backup to Find a Grave. We'll look at two additional resources for local cemetery records when we talk about the resources available on Family Search. Our second resource is the two death indexes on the New Jersey Archives website. They cover the years of 1848 through 1900. We'll click through the process of getting to them. First, clicking on Search the Collections. Then, although you could see this if your screen were large enough right from the start, we'll go ahead and click again on searchable databases with that rainbow kind of a pattern. And that takes us to this page where, in this case, we're going to click on the purple part. These two online indexes are provided by the archives so that we can search for a person and use the details we discover to order their death record from the archives with a handy form. We could also bring these details to the archives and make inexpensive printouts of those records when the archives is open again. In this case, we're making our own use of the indexes. Thomas H. Terry can be found with the index to the earlier time period. It turns out to be more helpful than Find a Grave could be because it gives us the date of death we were searching for. However, at the time we're recording this webinar, we can see that his entry does not include as many details as the other Thomas Terry's on the screen. That's an indication that his entry has not yet been reviewed and updated by archives staff. The collection is in the process of being updated. For a second search in this index, we can begin by entering the Tenbrook name in the last name field. If we type slowly, their autocomplete results can be seen and alternate spellings are revealed. These spellings and more variations are all present in the records. You might have to work your way through all of them, trying one spelling after another to find the one that was used for the person you're searching for. If you're a fast typist, you might miss them altogether. Mary Tenbrook turns out to have been entered here as Mary Tenbrook. Although they sound exactly the same, the spelling difference is significant. Here we find a 12-month span for her date of death because she is also waiting for review and updating. We're given the citation for her death record on the far right. Again, we can use the order form to purchase a copy of the death record, or in the future go to Trenton and copy it ourselves. It could be a serious mistake to rely on the index alone to determine that we have the right woman, so we would never stop a search with the date from just an index. We'll discuss a further option later, but before moving on from here, we must make a note of the citation given. Book BD, page 382. Our third option in searching for a death date would be useless for Mary Tenbrook or Thomas H. Terry. The Social Security Death Index is currently available for 1937 to February of 2014. Coverage varies greatly over the years. It doesn't offer many records before 1962, but should be checked for deaths before that point if other sources haven't been useful. At least one person with an earlier death date that I was searching for, I found later than I needed to when I finally did check, just in case. The Social Security Death Index can be found on several different websites. Ancestry Library Edition is free inside the library and is what I use most often. If you would like to try another that you don't have to be in the library to use, Fold 3 offers the Social Security Death Index for free for everyone. Here we can enter the name of Camilla Scrivens and learn her date of death. If we click on Index Record there in red, we have the opportunity to see a bit more detail and add a comment. If the date's all we're looking for, our question is answered. However, if we were to be in the library and used Ancestry Library Edition, we could expand our search to an additional related resource, the Social Security Applications and Claims Index. There we would learn her maiden name and the names of her parents as well. Different hosting sites for the Social Security Death Index can have guidelines they should warn you about, like the requirement to omit punctuation in names on Fold 3, such as the apostrophes in O'Dowd and D'Angelo. If you include the apostrophe on Fold 3, you'll get 0 hits. When you make the same search on Family Search or Ancestry Library Edition, they will omit the apostrophe for you and give you the hits. There are a surprising variety of reasons why people aren't listed in the Social Security Death Index, and it's possible to read contradictory guidelines online. It's free to make a search, though, so that's something I always try for this time period. It's helped me many times. Our fourth resource is the New Jersey Death Index from Reclaim the Records, an organization dedicated to obtaining free access to government records useful to genealogists. They offer an actual index to New Jersey deaths for 2001 through 2017 on the Death Index page. Here we can also search successfully for Camilla Scrivens. If we want to search for someone who died before 2001, some options are listed lower on the page. For the available years, they have listings that can be browsed instead of an easier to use computer index. 1901 to 1903 is the first range of years given, but is of very limited use in most cases. There is no date of death provided in these index years, just the year, and that's only of use if you can recognize the person from their name. There are occasional geographic clues, and African American people are identified in 1902, but it's not often that these clues are enough to be helpful. 1904 through 1919 is classified as coming soon, with an expected arrival at the end of 2018. It hasn't arrived yet, but 1916 through 1919 can actually be found on Family Search and will be discussed later. 1920 through 1929 is available here, except for the 1920 through 1924, the second half of the state is missing, and that includes the Plainfield area of Middlesex, Somerset, and Union counties. 1930 through 48 is unfortunately another completely missing time. 1949 through 2000 is available, just not as conveniently searchable as 2001 through 2017. You have to look at individual years, but there are increasingly more details given that will help you to recognize the right person. The years are broken down into groups, so the details, like exact date of exact date of birth, which starts in 1985, can be identified in the descriptions as they become available. A search for the death date of Miss Beezy Party could be made with the Reclaim the Records resource, although it might be a slow process. If we've used ProQuest historical newspapers unsuccessfully for an obituary search because we know of her only as Beatrice Party and haven't tried searching the newspaper just by last name, which would work, we also would not have been successful in using Find a Grave because she isn't listed at all there. So we might turn to these death indexes. We would hope to have narrowed down the possible years in which she might have died through the use of censuses and city directories. If those resources had also confirmed a Plainfield residence, we could go to the 1920 through 29 option and review the description of that category. We're fortunate that at this point the index covers 5 years at a time instead of just one. We click on the second 1925 to 29 link because Union County falls into the second half of the alphabet. It opens on Internet Archive. We've magnified our image with the magnifying lens with a plus sign on it on the lower right, but a search for party on the upper left using the blank magnifying lens is unsuccessful for unknown reasons, but we don't trust that and forge on to look for ourselves. We now want to move through the alphabet from the starting point here at Hudson County, Jersey City, to Union County, Plainfield City. Plainfield was large enough to have its own section within the county, which is very helpful. There can be an issue here with popular names. Until you see the obituary or death record, you won't know if you found the right James Brown or Mary Allen in the earlier indexes when you don't have the added clue of residence beyond county name. For that reason, it's unfortunate that during these years, South Plainfield is found unspecified among Middlesex County in general, and North Plainfield is among Somerset County. If Beezy Party had been a resident of Scotch Plains, she would be found among Union County in general. Remember, though, that the area hospital was in Plainfield, and those deaths will show up in the Plainfield listings no matter what a person's residence was. At this point, a search on the left for Plainfield will help us get to the right area quickly. This only works for the municipalities that have their own sections, but could be used to search for county names. Fortunately, the computer is able to read the word Plainfield, even though it couldn't read party. We arrive at the A's in Plainfield. They're shown in chronological order. We want the P's, which start on page 684. Because Beezy Party died in February 1925, and this record set begins with 1925, she's only the second person listed. The month is given in a date column, and the final digit of the year is given just in front of that. See that Louis Quinby died in March of 1926. There must not have been any Plainfield people with names that start with Q who died in 25, 28, or 29. During this time, the exact date is not being given, but just knowing the month and year would be enough to help us find Beezy Party's obituary on February 9th. There we learn that she did die in Muhlenberg Hospital, so she would have been found in the Plainfield listings even if she had lived in Scotch Plains or North or South Plainfield. In some of the later years, location of death is given using a locality master code. A link to the code is given in the description of the date span on the New Jersey Death Index page. The codes are 4 digits. If you end up working in a year when the indexes give a 5-digit code, just ignore the last digit. One additional note, some pages are apparently mislabeled or out of order. This page seems to be mislabeled as Springfield, but is actually Plainfield. Just try to monitor the names and dates to recognize where you are. Our next category of resources is the less obvious newspapers than our Plainfield papers discussed in the previous presentation. These other newspapers might supplement what we found in the Plainfield papers, or they might be alternatives if we haven't been lucky with the Plainfield ones. Some people choose to have obituaries printed in the Star Ledger and not the Courier News. Sanuke Bowles, who lived in North Plainfield, is an example. Our search for her in the Courier News using ProQuest historical newspapers would not find an obituary for her, but we can go to nj.com and search there. Scroll to the bottom of the nj.com page and click on obituaries in the tinted area. Then choose the Star Ledger. On the right side of the page you're taken to, click on Advanced Search beneath the blue Search button. Next, you want to click on the drop-down menu next to the calendar and choose All Time to search. Unfortunately, this free resource does not really cover all the time in which the Star Ledger has been published, but seems to run from September 2002 to the present. We enter her name, Sanuke Bowles, and the search is quickly successful. A death date for Ms. Bowles would also be found using the New Jersey Death Index from Reclaim the Records, but using the Star Ledger's website takes us directly to the obituary we wanted anyway. Local papers for Scotch Plains and Fanwood, New Brunswick, and Westfield are all additional options. They're listed on the handout for any cases in which an obituary might appear in one of their newspapers. Another way to keep alert to additional papers as they come available as an online resource, or where you might be searching beyond the Plainfield area, is to check the New Jersey State Library list of online historical newspapers. It's arranged by location. If you knew your Plainfield family came from Perth Amboy originally, for example, it would be worth searching for an obituary there too. Family search is the next category of resources. It requires registration but is free to use. There's a lot to it, but let's start there with the 1916 through 29 years of the New Jersey Death Index. Once we've signed in, we get to these records on Family Search by using the drop-down menu under Search and choosing Catalog. There we enter New Jersey in the place field and click on Search. Our long list of New Jersey subjects opens and we scroll down to Vital Records Indexes. When we click on that, it shows us all 14 record sets for that category. We want New Jersey Death Index, collection record 1901 to 1903, 1916 to 1929. Although 1901 to 1903 is again of very little value, we do not want to click on New Jersey Death Index 1916 through 29 instead. It's 2 lines below, but it's still being worked on by Family Search indexers and is in a difficult state to work with right now. So, clicking New Jersey Death Index, collection record 1901 to 1903, 1916 to 1929, we can choose to view digital images of the New Jersey Death Index. Only 1925 through 29 were available for the Plainfield area on the Reclaim the Record site. Here, in a collection that says it covers 1916 to 1929, they are actively being worked on by volunteer indexers, so the times and places actually available will be continuously expanding until the volunteers can finish. Updates are announced on a monthly basis, but without description. In a quick peek at the Family Search blog, we can see that 3,869 more records for this collection were indexed between March and April 2021. Whether Family Search will be able to get the Somerset, Middlesex, and Union County records that were missing from the Reclaim the Record site is unknown, but they do currently offer the missing years of 1916 through 1919. There are a variety of reasons why someone's death could be found in indexes of death records, even though they have no obituary. In the past, the library has encountered cases in which a suicide went unacknowledged in the newspaper, another in which an obituary was considered a needless expense and omitted, and several cases of people who had been residents of area nursing homes but had no other local connection that would warrant a local obituary. In any of those cases, an index to deaths could be invaluable in identifying a date of death. That's not the case at all for our next example that we'll look at for demonstration purposes only. We'll look for and easily find Frederick Mowinkel, who doesn't fit into any of these categories. Here he is. Another resource found on Family Search is one I was unaware of until working on this webinar. We find it by returning to Search the Catalog. This time we enter Plainfield as the place instead of New Jersey, and go to Cemeteries as the category. There are 3 options here. Our first option will turn out to be digitized typed pages and the only one of the 3 cemeteries options listed which is available online. Not everything in the catalog is online. We can click on the red message to view this resource. The author has included a brief history at the top of this list. This is also a place we can search for and find Amy Webster's date of death in the listings of the Cemetery of the Religious Society of Friends, but the listings here are not complete. Thomas H. Terry cannot be found here, but Mary Tenbrook can be found. For those buried in Evergreen Cemetery who are listed, there is the benefit of learning whether they're buried in the Baptist or the Methodist portion of the cemetery. In addition to the listing for the Society of Friends burial place, there are the two separate lists for Evergreen Cemetery and one for Brook Avenue Cemetery in North Plainfield, as well as a listing for the Coles family burial ground, which I believe no longer exists and can't be found on Find a Grave. The second option under Plainfield Cemeteries is not available online, only in microfilm, which they're indicating with a little picture of a microfilm reel. However, it seems likely that it's the original source for the next online resource listed on our handout from US Gen Web. That online version is a transcription of burials at Evergreen Cemetery, which I consult whenever Find a Grave has not been able to help me. We won't look at the online transcription during this webinar because of restrictions placed on it by the person who has provided it to US Gen Web, but we're free to consult it whenever we want. That listing does include Mary Tenbrook, but she's found alphabetically in the B section under Brooke, Mary Ten, although someone with the similarly Dutch name of Ten Eyck is found in the T section under Ten Eyck. The family tree on Family Search is another great resource and has been most helpful to me in researching some of the Plainfield participants in the Civil War, particularly when those participants died during the gap in our newspaper coverage or when the men left the Plainfield area and died elsewhere. You won't find everyone you search for here, but it's definitely worth a look. The information given there isn't always backed up with citations, but it can help as a clue and it can cover the entire range of time in which there could be record of Plainfield area deaths. It wasn't an easy search, but it could also be used to get information about our friend Mary Tenbrook. Had the fluctuating spelling of her last name kept us from finding her in the resources we've already used, we could still have success by using the Family Search family tree. To make the search, we return again to the drop-down menu under Search. This time we choose Family Tree. There are many, many listings for women named Mary Tenbrook, but if we search for Mary Tenbrook with or without Plainfield as a residence, to be honest, we're not going to find her the way I believe we should be able to find her. She's only to be found under her maiden name, which a family researcher might easily not know before the search. What does seem reasonable is that a researcher might know the name of one of her children and working backward, search for that. 3 children are listed and searchable, and their mother is identified. Alternatively, we could use this search, identifying her first name, residence, and her husband's last name. They don't all fit in one screen when all 3 fields are filled in, so the residence was filled in after this point and before clicking on Find. This is her index listing. It identifies her as Mary Huff, wife of Peter Tenbrook. We won't take the time to click on her name to get to the full entry. When I first found her there was other valuable information provided, but the only notation regarding her death was that she was deceased. Having found that date of death now in multiple sources, as a Family Search user, I was able to add it to the Mary Huff entry, along with a link to the death record we'll discuss later. Now, researchers can also use the Family Search family tree to discover the presumed death date of Mary Tenbrook and make their own efforts to either confirm or correct it. Our final free resource for finding Plainfield area death dates has to be the local history department at Plainfield Public Library. Here there are a great number of worthwhile holdings, and we'll look at three major ones representing three categories. First is the library's collection of funeral home records from Memorial Funeral Home and Runyon Funeral Home. An index for it can be found on our website. The records roughly cover 1906 to the early 1980s. To find these indexes, we would start at the library's homepage and use the drop-down menu under Departments. We would then choose Local History and then Collections Index. Genealogy is a tab on the page you'll go to. If you click on that tab, Local Records Index and Transcription is the fifth option on the page, which you can't see from the top. Looking lower on the page, you'll find the Local Records Index and Transcriptions option. There are additional resources on that page that might be of use, but you can also go directly to the specific funeral home records collection, which is the sixth option here. Click on the funeral register on the far left to get to it. The Memorial Funeral Home records include Runyon. For this example, we'll click on the top item, the card index. It will open as a searchable PDF and is written in chronological order. If we search for Ellen Booker, we learn her date of death immediately, but a researcher learning about Ellen Booker also has the option of requesting a scan of the funeral home record from the library. These records may be brief or they may be more detailed and even include a copy of the death certificate and/or military discharge. There is an obituary for Mrs. Booker in the Plainfield Courier News, as well as an account of her funeral, but both are very brief, and neither one names her parents or tells that she was born in Virginia and came to Plainfield 12 years before her death. That information is in the funeral home record and is available through the library. We're looking at a portion of that record here. The library also holds a large collection of potentially useful books. Researchers could contact us to request a lookup, for example, in Our Brothers Gone Before by Charles Eckhart and Robert Mcavoy. This is a two-volume set of books listing New Jersey Civil War related interments. Here we would learn that Thomas H. Terry was a musician with Company B of the 11th New Jersey Infantry, who died on April 11, 1876, and is buried in Evergreen Cemetery of Plainfield, Union County. Finally, the library also offers lookups from online sources, like that expanded Social Security resource on Ancestry Library Edition, and Family Search has a very valuable one. This is the New Jersey Index to Records of Births, Marriages, and Deaths, 1848 to 1900. These are the records that are indexed on the New Jersey Archives website. The collection is available only within New Jersey, or rather, only within Family Search research centers and affiliate libraries. Because Plainfield Public Library is an affiliate library, you can come here and use it, or you can contact us to request a lookup or a Zoom reference appointment during which you would be able to see the images. We'll run through the steps to search for it for anyone who plans to visit the library. If you make a Zoom appointment, you won't need to know this. We find this collection by starting on the Family Search homepage and again navigating through the Search drop-down menu to Catalog. We've entered New Jersey again, but this time, even though the record collection we want uses the word index in its name, we do not choose Vital Records-indexes. we want to click on the regular vital records. And below that, we choose New Jersey Index to Records of Births, Marriages, and Deaths, 1848 to 1900. It's the 27th item listed. The records are broken down over 3 pages by type of record, date, and place. This is what you see at the top of the page. To find Mary Tenbrook's death record, we can use the citation we noted on the New Jersey Archives site. On our affiliate library computers, Book BD shows both a camera, meaning that a scanned image is available, and a magnifying lens, meaning that a computer search is available. On an outside computer, you would only see a key indicating that the collection is locked. If we didn't have that citation, but knew Mary Tenbrook had died in Union County, and if we were possibly working our way through the 1870s looking for her and had made our way to 1877, we could use that computer search to see if we could find her in 1877. It just wouldn't work. The variability of her name would again be an issue. In this case, the handwriting has been interpreted as being Mary Tubrook. It's very understandable for a lowercase n to look like a lowercase u, and that's what's happened here. So, we never want to trust any computer searches as a final word. Mary Tenbrook is there on page 382 of Book BD. I've seen it. You can see it inside the library and outside via Zoom appointment. There are ways to capture the image, but we aren't going to use them because Family Search licensing agreements don't permit it. Instead, let's look at the variations in Mary Tenbrook's name that we've encountered over the course of this webinar. It was a lot of effort to work through them all, but if you've made it this far into the webinar with us, you'll do fine with your own family. Have fun finding your own Plainfield area death dates. Thank you for joining me for today's program. I hope you found it informative. Now to the Q&A and then any suggestions that anyone would like to offer of other resources not covered.